I'm your host, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, we are pleased to have as a guest with us on the show Mr. Josh Wilson. Joshua Wilson is the founder and president of United Ethos Wealth Partners, a new tech-driven RIA. That's a firm formed in partnership with Tidal Financial Group to support independent-minded advisors, help them grow their practices without sacrificing the people and values that give their lives meaning. From humble beginnings growing up on a rural farm in Alabama, Josh has been recognized by Forbes as one of the top wealth advisors in America. He's a graduate of Brown University, a PhD candidate studying behavioral finance, and an adjunct professor in the entrepreneurship department at Baylor University. Welcome to the show, Josh, and really thank you for making the time to be here with us today.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Perry. I really like your show quite a bit, so it's a pleasure to be featured. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more in the pre-show and listening to a little bit of your story. I always like to start this with, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get to the place where now you're studying, behavioral finance as a PhD candidate? You're working in this wonderful industry, financial planning. Tell us about this story. I want to connect the dots between your upbringing and where you're at today.
Well, man, I grew up on a farm in rural Alabama, middle of nowhere. I think the nearest stop sign was probably 5 miles away, and traffic light probably 10 miles away. And, it was an area where I definitely learned the value of hard work. I grew up on a farm. My dad owned a junkyard that sat right in front of the landfill in one of the poorest counties in Alabama. So I learned how to be a junk man first, and learned how to be a farm boy first, and learned really how to work hard. But my father was a minister and grew up singing in church, and so I had the opportunity to really have good family values instilled in me, and part of that was personal responsibility for what you can do and what you get out of life. So that upbringing is who I am. I don't think that I've changed very much since those days, except I've got a few degrees and some experience. But I feel like who I am is exactly who it's always been. I had a weird situation. I was a football player. My brother played at Auburn. I had a cousin in Alabama. I've got nephews playing in the Big 12 right now, and so football was something that we really valued. And I think the thing I love about football is it's a team sport, and there's so many different types of people that can be great football players. You can be big, and you can be strong, and or you can be small and fast, and there's all these different skills, and every position doesn't have to have all the skills. And that's really molded how I think about working with teams and with families. Is you've got different skill sets that are coming together towards the same goal. And so you don't have to have someone that's just like you. And so, that's molded how I think about teams, how I think about family. And, it was at a combine that a guy comes up to me and says, "Hey, is this stuff for real?" A football combine, my junior year of high school. And he says, I said, "Yeah." And he turns out he's not talking about my football stats. He's talking about my grades. From then on, I started being recruited by the Ivy Leagues and other academic institutions. And just by the grace of God, they found me, and I applied and got in, and had a chance to go to Brown. And God blessed me again. I got to give my graduation speech up there. That was really my first big speech, and learned that I love public speaking. And from then it's just been hard work, and eventually things come around. When you're someone that doesn't come from connections, or doesn't come from a network of sorts, you work hard and you build relationships as you go, and you do things the long way, and you do things the way they have to be done. So I got into this business. My degree was in religious studies. Why? Because my family valued faith, and so did I. But it was after school I got interested in business, and started a wirehouse in their training program, that was right at the financial crisis. So I struggled for a couple of years in the business, just barely getting by. And, finally got I'd say my real start at TD Ameritrade, where I got a good training program and was able to work my way up there, leading their national sales training program after being an advisor and a manager and several other things, and working with their active trader team. Became a chartered market technician at that time. And it was that time that I started understanding the RIA world. In many of the worlds I'd come in before, I remember my first quarter as a traditional bank advisor, and I had all these new assets come in, and yet I still figured, being in the top of that dynamic of that stack, and yet still at the bottom of compensation. I remember sitting down with my manager saying, "Hey, why am I still at the bottom quartile of income?" Well, you found people that use these products, and these other people found people that needed these products. And I found very quickly in the industry that I was going to need something that allowed me to be a fiduciary and learn what that term is and make sure I felt that I was doing the best for my clients, not just what was available. So I went the RIA route, worked with a firm for a while, but worked my way up into partner and chief investment officer there. We really blew up in just a few years, about 150 million to 600 in less than 5 years. Me being chief investment officer and really being the rainmaker as I mined referral programs, created referral processes and centers of influence, and got those things going. I then took over a turnaround situation, really a few months before COVID, firm that was in a lot of trouble, and we got that turned around and got that going in the right direction. And it was very favorably acquired near the end of last year by Mercer Advisors. So we've seen, I've been very blessed to have some great opportunities with some great firms, and that's kind of how I got to where I am in a very brief moment. But the new thing I'm sure we'll get into. But that's just a bit about my background there, Travis.
Well, what I find fascinating about your story, I mean, this is a rags to riches story, and I know you probably don't want to describe it that way, but for me, what I'm hearing is a guy who really did bootstrap it, who really said, I don't come from any sort of family of background that's going to help me get into Brown. Like, you got into Brown, and now you're a PhD candidate. When you really struggled with grades, and you're at the forefront of the industry, when clearly, like, you had no idea this industry even existed. Like, you were one. I was this way as a kid. Like, I had no idea what financial services was, what financial planning was. I was on a paper route when I found out about it. And the guy that I was trying to collect from, like, "Hey, you owe me $12 for this month." I'm like, "Why are you at home in the middle of the day?" And he's like, "Well, I'm working." I'm like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm a day trader." So he taught me on the sidewalk what financial planning was in a roundabout way, and it was very, very interesting. But I love your story, and I love that you focus on values, because values is huge when it comes to balance. When we talk balance, we need to know what our values are, right? So I love that you bring this up, that you talked about what your family values and what they were and how they shaped you. I mean, just listening to your story, I can hear somebody who really learned at a young age what it meant to work hard, what it meant to have God in your life, and how that helped you to be a great team player. Like you mentioned, the team differences, and I can just see, in the little snippet that you shared with us, how that's really helped you to be successful. Let me ask you a question about values. How have values continued to play a role in your life today? What have they done throughout your experience to get you where you are now? How and why are values so important?
Well, I think that your values are supposed to be your guiding principles as well. These are ultimately the things that I want to be the things that guide my life. That at the end of my life, I want these things to be the things that I'm known for. I want these things to be the things that I think about myself and that people think about when they think about me. I've heard it said that it's not, people remember not what you said, but how you made them feel. And I think that, with my values, yes, I should articulate them, and yes, I should be prepared to articulate them. But I think they should also be evident. If someone spent 24 hours with me, they would know. I think that they should be able to know what I value, and part of that is, you know, is setting expectations not only with myself but with other people. And I think that we advisors oftentimes we're very good. Hopefully, we're very good at setting expectations with clients. You know, um, we help them form their expectations. We help them manage their expectations. And frankly, when I'm thinking about my values, I've got to think about, am I making time for them, and how am I demonstrating that they're a priority? You know, when I think in terms of, if you tell me, for example, that your faith or your family are number one or number two in your life, if you demoted them to number five, how would that change your life? And I think for a lot of us, that question is, well, I don't know that it would change anything if I called it number five. So is it really number one? So I think that my values have been something that shape how I go about doing what I'm doing, because ultimately I think that everything that I do, whether it is education or business or networking or another project or advisory project or whatever, all those things should ultimately reflect back to the things that I say that I live for. What's the main point of this story? And I think of my life as a story. What's the main point? What's the main point of the story? The main point is not going to be that, for 18 months I did X, or for 3 years I was with this firm, or for 15 years I was with this firm. My story is ultimately going to be how all these things contributed to the main theme of my life, and what do I want those things to be?
Yeah, I love that you're speaking in what is the main thing? What's the most important value? What's the most important priority? We talk about it a lot, don't we? Like, put our priorities in order, but what are they? Do we really know, and do we make the time for it? So I'm glad you're bringing this up. What has helped you to keep those priorities front and center while you're doing so many things? Like, I know you're growing this business, you're the CEO, you're finishing the dissertation, you're adjunct professor. Like, we could go on. You're doing a bunch of things. What's the secret sauce for you to keep those priorities where they're at while you're growing your business?
Yeah, so I think there's probably two things, and the first thing is how I start my day. You know, Dr. Perry, I've tried many things to keep my faith number one. When I was young, I used to read my Bible before bed, and for some reason, I just can't seem to do that anymore. So what I always do is I always start my morning with a sermon, and I listen to them on YouTube. I've got my pastor from my church. I'll re-listen to sermons. There's other churches I'll listen to, and so I start by hearing the Word of God, and as it is dictated by ministers that I trust and I believe that they're biblically based. So when I hear that, it challenges me. I need that challenge every day to be the best person that I can be, because the fact is, man, is I'm very competitive, and I'm a work hard first guy. My attitude is I can fix everything by working harder, and that's not always the truth. So when I start my day with something that gives me balance and something that reminds me of what is most important in my life and the things that I need to, we think that we learn something and then we're going to apply it forever. That is garbage. No, if I don't keep something front and center, I'm going to fail at it. And I know that about myself. And so I don't think that I'm better. I'm humble enough to know that if I don't continue to put this in front of me, it's going to fall further and further into the background. And so, frankly, Dr. Perry, I'm a better person when I start my day with the Word of God. Um, you know, it's a and I think sometimes it's interesting because, I know everyone is not a person of faith. Great. But there's so much wisdom in the Bible. And so, whatever your core value is, you need to be, I think, polishing that a little bit every day. And so before I get on social media, before I check the news, before I look at markets, I want to have something going into my head in the morning that starts my day right. And whether if I'm traveling, I'll have a few minutes to pray. But ultimately, starting with the thing that I say is most important. Otherwise, Travis, there's a lot of times if I didn't start with that, then I would tell you that God's important to me, but I would have nothing to prove it. So for me, starting my day with that is the way that I say, hey, I'm starting with this. I'm going to have a short prayer. Maybe I can pray later, but I'm going to make sure I start with it. I don't get lost in it. The other thing I think is just expectations. I mentioned expectations before. Advisors are in the business of setting expectations. It's so important. One of the things that I say this to my class, I say this to my clients, I say this to anyone that works for me, I say, or works with me, satisfaction. Now, this is your satisfaction. It's my satisfaction. It's your client's satisfaction. Humans, your satisfaction depends on the distance between expectations and reality. Yeah. The bigger the distance between expectations and reality, the lower your satisfaction is going to be. I read this report from, it was one of these, I don't forget, but it was from 2020, and it asked advisors and it asked clients what their expectations for returns were going to be. Advisors said just under 11, clients said just under 11%. Advisors said something more like 6.5. That's like a 60% difference in expectations, right? So I have to ask myself, am I forming and managing my expectations, just like I'm doing that for my clients? Because improper expectations lead to emotional discomfort. And that emotional discomfort is going to lead to emotional decisions, and emotional decisions lead to poor outcomes. And we know that as advisors when we're talking about to our clients. But what about ourselves? What about our families? What about our colleagues? I want to ensure that my behavior is lining up with my goal. So one of the biggest values that I want to bring my clients, my advisors, my family is coaching them to avoid the behaviors that might take them off track. And that's going to come up with everybody. We need to be setting expectations for our clients, for our families, and for ourselves, and that those expectations are realistic. And when we begin to set these expectations and think about communicating these things, when we begin to do that with ourselves, for example, it requires us to ask, okay, if these are my values, what am I doing this week to prove that to someone who looked at my schedule, that didn't hear my voice and me say my family is important, or me say that my education is important? If they looked at my life, would they come to the same conclusion that I just spoke with my mouth? And so if I'm going to get that from my family, I need to set the expectations that, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's what it's going to take. Here is what is required for me during this time. And here's what we're going to do together as a family. And the same thing with my colleagues. I think that starting with the right thing, starting with something that you say is most important, you need to prove it to yourself every day. And I think that you need to be setting expectations with yourself, your family, your colleagues, your advisors, but most importantly, yourself. If you don't set expectations with yourself, then you're not going to be satisfied with your outcomes. You need to understand what it's going to take to get to where you're from, to where you're trying to go. This is the same way with health and fitness. Is what are my expectations? What do I need? How do I measure success in this stuff? So I'd say that, that's the two things probably for me, is making sure I'm setting expectations and starting with something important.
Are you sure you're not supposed to be a preacher? I mean, I know you came from, your father was a minister, but I mean, like, preach on, brother. Like, this is exactly what we need.
I do tend to get a bit excited about these things.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And the
Well,
reason
I think
being is that, I'm preaching this every day. So I feel sometimes, I'm preaching to people who aren't listening. They know this, but they don't actually do it. So to hear an advisor who is so busy, he's got so much going on and knows that God is first, family is second, like listening to your priorities and what you value is huge. And being able to walk that walk is essentially what you're saying. When you don't, and you talked about expectations a lot, but when the expectation is one thing and the reality is another, psychologists call the difference between, and this behavioral finance stuff is cognitive dissonance. That
yes.
cognitive dissonance creates stress. And it's the stress that we don't like. There's eustress, which is good, and distress, which is bad. The distress is that, it's that space that is created when the reality doesn't meet expectations, like you were talking about so eloquently. So I could not agree with you more than just doing one thing, like you mentioned. If I just listen to a sermon, if I just show up in the morning and listen to something from the Bible that as you were mentioning, really does check that box, then you're now feeling less stressed. You're feeling like I'm doing it. I'm actually showing up and I'm walking my walk. So thank you for not just preaching it, but actually doing it. Number one. Let's shift gears a little bit and let's talk about how growing a firm without losing balance. Like we've been talking balance a little bit. As you're growing firms, and you've been an advisor for 17 plus years now, and you're the CEO of this company that you guys are one of the biggest firms out there really in this space. So let's talk about this as you're growing and as you've seen the growth and as you're helping this firm to grow. What are some of the struggles that you feel or that you see at your firm in trying to grow while keeping the balance that we're talking about?
Yeah, I think that distraction is probably one of the things that we naturally work. That's always a struggle, and I think that how do I say this? There's so many things that one can do. And for example, let's take this into a fitness example. You and I spoke just briefly about how we both like to stay in shape, and um, I think that there's a million ways to do it. And people will ask, like, what's the best program? Well, I say it's probably the one that you're most likely to stick with and that you hopefully enjoy a little bit. Ultimately, it's about getting some resistance and getting your heart rate up. It's pretty simple for exercise. So I think that,
Real quick, I know we're live on YouTube, but why don't you back up about 30 seconds and tell that same thing? For whatever reason, the sound got really garbled. We'll edit
yeah,
out on the finished podcast, but tell us again what you were saying there.
yeah. So I think that. Sorry, what was the question again? I got distracted there.
Oh, you're good. You were talking about distractions. Yeah, you're saying there's so many distractions that keep us from keeping our balance while we're growing.
Oh yeah.
You were getting into it.
Yeah, so there's so many distractions that keep us from keeping our balance. When you're trying to grow a firm, think about it in terms of fitness. Well, what's the best way to get in shape? Or what's the best workout program? Should I play a sport? Should I lift weights? Should I do yoga? Should I do P90X, CrossFit, whatever? Well, the fact is a lot of those things are effective, and probably most of those things are effective because ultimately it comes down to resistance and getting your heart rate up, right? That's exercise. But if we continue to, I think that the joke is, oh, squirrel. And there's a million different ways people can do things. And so what we end up doing is being distracted by another potential way of growing, and we're not really getting good at anything. The fact is, one of the things that I tell my students a lot, and the fact is, I think that adults need to hear this as well. We all tend to just think of the things that we're good at. And somehow, at some point in our life, we just decided what we're good at and what we're not good at. And the fact is, I don't think of it that way. I think of it as I've just not put in enough reps to be good at this. I can be good at just about anything if I put in enough reps. And I can get better very quickly if I put in some time on things. And so we don't give things time enough to be successful. And so we continue to change. What about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? As a PhD yourself, doctor, you could have got interested in something else, and that dissertation would have never gotten done. You had to stay ultra focused on one thing, one topic, one study, one set of data, and continue to go in that direction. So I think that one of the things that we continually struggle with is, are these things distracting us, and are we really focusing on the main things that we have to do? And if I use a football analogy, that's blocking and tackling. If I don't block, the play call doesn't matter. It's the basic things. And if we're doing something new, we probably can't do 5 things new all at once really well. We probably need to get really good at something before we do something else. So I think that distraction is the hardest thing to battle, because there's always another way to grow and another thing to add. And especially if you're limited on funds or on manpower or something like that, you end up becoming a inadequate or barely adequate at a lot of things. And being able to star at something and get really good at something, I think is a better way to get there than just continue to spread yourself out with more and more and more distraction.
I think you nailed this. Be really good at one thing. There's, for example, even just with social media, most of the social media people that I follow that have taught me about anything is they be really good at one. You don't have to spread yourself to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Just get really good at one. When you've mastered that, then go to the next one, and then go to the next one. And I think this is the same with how we grow. With anything, we've used the book Achieving Balance to really get into the minds of financial advisors on stages, on podcasts all over the country. Then we moved to podcast format, where we've been able to take that same message and now do interview style and really help to spread the message even further. So I'm with you. I think this is exactly how one should operate. But there's a lot of shiny objects, right? We talk about shiny object syndrome on this show quite extensively. So let's talk about what is working well for you, for your firms. Tell us what is like one thing, what's been working really well for you to grow?
Yeah, I think the direction that we're going with the new firm, a lot of the success I've had in the past has been with building centers of influence and turning that into lead flow. Basically, the interesting thing that we have with Tidal and with ETF Think Tank and several other partners that we'll probably be bringing into the mix is we've got some very influential and just some of the best portfolio managers and thought leaders in the industry that have a tremendous influence in the active management space. And I'd say especially active management space, but also passive as well, because they're total portfolio guys. So we have a lot of influence from these folks, and they're hearing from advisors that are not interested, or I'd say that are struggling in their current situation. There's advisors that they struggle to an extent because of the way that their firms are currently put together. They're nothing but a contractor. I hate to say nothing, but maybe that's the wrong thing to say. I don't know. But they're a contractor or they're an employee. They're not true partners in the firm. Everything is complicated. There's ever-changing comp plans. They're nickel and dime to death with comp plan changes and with different fees for this, fee for this, fee for this. There's asterisks everywhere in comp plans. And, they say the payout is this, but then by the time you take all these other things out from all the asterisks, it's this. And they can't be themselves. Compliance tells them they can't be themselves. They can't have a podcast. They can't, they have 20,000 advisors and all of them have to post the exact same thing to LinkedIn. So they can't be themselves. They can't market themselves. They can't brand themselves. They can't choose their custodians. They may have some pretty good investment solutions, but they have pressure and problematic from their firms and some pretty problematic conflicts as well. And so, what the interesting thing about title is a lot of these types of advisors follow title, and they follow, and the influencers at title, and you want to use their ETFs, want to use their funds, things like that. And the great thing about that I've really loved about the guys at title is, they're agnostic to the funds that are used. And so that's great for us. And that was the reason for the partnership is, there's all these advisors that really want to work with them, and also retail clients that want to work with them, that see them on these podcasts, that see them on YouTube, that see them on Twitter spaces and things like that, and follow them and would like to work with them. But these advisors at a lot of shops aren't able to, and they can't be themselves. So, with this partnership, what we're able to do is leverage, title and the attention that they have with retail clients, creating lead flow that way. And also advisors that are looking for a different solution, advisors that want to be partners, advisors that want to have more choice, and that want to be bound together in a certain way with a united ethos, which is the name of our firm. That's where we get it from. A united ethos is we believe in a fiduciary standard. We believe in doing what's best for the client. We believe that there is not one exact way to be a great advisor. I believe that because there's not one type of client. And so, you can be two advisors with the same firm and attract different types of clients. I don't, we're not going to tell people what they need to celebrate, how they need to operate their lives. We're not here to be the social police or the political police. We're bound together on this united ethos that we believe that the client should come first. Client is absolutely number one. I don't want to hear anything different. I don't want a comp plan that tells me advisors are first. I don't want a comp plan that tells me that the firm is first. I'm absolutely adamant that the client should come first and the advisor should come second. Firm is third. And there's so many advisors out there that are sick of feeling like the firm is first on everything, and that they're pushed down in that order. So, the way that we're growing is basically recognizing that there's advisors out there that want to do things different. They want to have control over their brand, control over the way that they do things, but they also realize that they don't want to manage a practice. They don't want to do the back office stuff. They don't want to have to worry about all that stuff. They want to worry about vendors and operations and HR and all that stuff. They want to be able to be themselves, work with people who don't force politics on them, that don't force social stuff on them, that don't force products down their throat, but still have an open architecture in their investment philosophy where they have great portfolios that are provided for them and other external products, and be able to do things their way, and with people that feel that think like they think, that want want to ask you about your personal life. Are you staying balanced? And the things that you told me that you wanted, the reason for you coming here, are you maintaining those things? One of the things I learned, Travis, is I'm decent at a lot of things, but there's one thing I'm really good at, and that's getting the best out of people. I love to help people get to the next level. If there's anything, I'm called the president, but if anything, I think of myself as more the head coach, because I want to help every advisor and to help every client get the most they can out of their business, not just to grow their business. Because here's the thing. I have never subscribed to this thing that you've got to choose. You've got to choose between being a great father and being a great businessman. You have to be absent or you have to be present. I don't believe that. I've seen my brother, who's one of the men I look up to most in my life. He's 14 years older than me. He works at a church. He's got a business on the side, and he's got 3 boys. He's coached everybody all the way through. He's a great husband. I've had the benefit of seeing great men and trying to emulate these great men. And I believe that one doesn't have to choose between these things if they have a balanced mindset. And here's the thing. You got to get around people and work with people that believe the way that you believe and want the kind of life that you want. Otherwise, it'll always be a push, for business. Yes, we can be successful in business. And when it's time to go to work, I expect us to go to work, and I'm going to push us to go to work. I'm also going to take that same amount of intensity in, hey, you said family is important. It's time for a vacation. It's time to cut out. It's time to prioritize these things. How can I help you live the life that you want? And that's who we want to attract. So that's what we're doing is we're being ourselves. We're broadcasting our values. Here's what we're about. Here's the type of firm that we want to put together. We're broadcasting that to clients and advisors alike. And it's creating some traction. People that want to live a balanced lifestyle, but also want to be successful in business and grow their practices.
So cool. 15 some odd years ago when I first started, you're exactly right. The firms I was working for was firm first, client second, advisor last.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Structure.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. Like, that's exactly how it felt. I'm like, wow, this is all about them. It's all about the firm. And there's no way I'm going to continue to grow if I don't market brand myself. And, so that led me into independent space where I was like, wow, now I've lost all my support. Now I'm everything. And I was like, wow, maybe I bit off more than I can chew because my balance went out the window. And I realized, oh, snap, I'm becoming that workaholic that I didn't want to become when I was working for the firm. But now I had no enemy. The firm was no longer there. I had no excuse. I became the manager of everything. So exactly right. Having the best of both worlds where you can have that support, plus you can have the independence, the freedom to be able to brand, market, and actually grow is huge. And I have seen in the financial planning industry, I know we talk to a lot of other industries here, but financial planning industry, like I've seen this move towards this type of model. And I love seeing firms out there. If advisors like this, they want to have a place where they can have balance. They want to be able to grow independently without, having the fear of doing it all themselves. How do they get a hold of you? What's the best place and method to
Absolutely. They should email me directly. My email is jwilson. That's just the letter J, then WILSON at unitedethos.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and Twitter and all the other stuff as well. But just email me. We'll pick up the phone and we'll have a chat. Ultimately, I just want to know, what is someone about? What are they trying? What kind of lifestyle do they want? How is their lifestyle different right now than the lifestyle that they want that they want to have? Ultimately, I want to work with people that I enjoy, that have similar values, that want to live a balanced lifestyle. But I still want to grow. I'm not going to trade in success for something else. There is a way to have both, but it does require intentionality. And the thing that a lot of folks struggle with, especially advisors, I think, because a lot of us come from independent type stuff where, we're an island and there's support, but we got to go ask for it. And then until we have enough AUM, no one cares about us. By the time that we have significant AUM, we don't really need anything. I won't say nothing, but we don't need the fancy office in the big city that no one goes to. We don't need the absurdly ineffective training programs that we're paying for. We don't need the layers and layers of sales managers. We don't need all of those things. So we just kind of keep to ourselves.
Yep.
I understand why we do that. However, the thing is everything works better in a team. Why? Because, and I'm going to go back to my football analogy, but the fact is, I don't need 15 quarterbacks on my team. This is one of the things that a lot of leaders and advisors do when they strike out on their own, is they say, okay, I'm going to start a firm, and like you said, I've got to be the manager, blah, 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 blah. They end up what I call hiring by looking in the mirror, because they look at themselves and say, a guy like me or a girl like me is successful. And so I need to look for people with the same characteristics as me. Problem is, let's just call you a quarterback. If you got successful because you got a great arm and whatever, great arm, you hire another quarterback, you're just going to get in each other's way. You need somebody to block. You need someone to hand the ball to. You need someone to throw the ball to down the field. And so when we start trying to become managers and things like that, we often try to imitate ourselves and reproduce ourselves rather than constructing a team that offers different things, has different strengths. And that's one of the things that we really bring together for advisors is, hey, this is not just a back office sort of thing. This is also our network of advisors and getting to know you and getting to know what makes you tick and what makes you special, because we're also looking for opportunities to pair advisors with other advisors, other teams, because, hey, this person is exceptional planner. This person is exceptional at these employee plans. This person is exceptional. So we're looking for opportunities to say, hey, listen, you are a great running back, but we need someone for you to run behind. And this guy, he's great kind of guy for you to run behind. And guess what? When we get to the end zone, you're both going to score.
Yeah.
And so we're looking for these type of synergies. Not, some people have their teams, they're already assembled and they're looking to grow. Others are independent advisors looking to break away, but they know that I can't just go out there on my own. I don't want to start it from scratch. So yeah, reach out to me directly. I'm on LinkedIn, Joshua Wilson, and Jay Wilson at UnitedEthos.com is an easy way to email me, and we'll set up a time to chat. Absolutely.
Awesome. We'll put the handles and email there in the show notes for those that aren't catching this live. Josh, this has been a treat. I want to call you Coach Wilson from now on. I felt like, I was in the locker room getting, motivated by what you're saying. I'm ready to become an advisor again and join your team. There's so much going on here that I love. But this has been a consistent theme I've noticed on the Balanced Growth Show. Consistent theme of growing as a firm requires that we have teams that are working together. I love the analogy of going down the football field, celebrating together, because we're all going to score. It's a win-win-win. The clients win, the firm wins, the advisors win, and putting those clients first. I love this analogy. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your time with us, what you're struggling with. These are real struggles, and I know advisors struggle with them. We've interviewed the Make Time Institute as a team over 650 advisors, business owners that are connected to this industry and beyond about these issues. So I really enjoy hearing what's working, what is helping your team to move forward and grow while still keeping your balance. Best of luck to you. And listeners, thank you for watching, listening, subscribing. Tell us how we're doing. Send me an email at travis@MakeTimeInstitute if you'd like to suggest a guest or be a guest yourself. And again, thank you, Josh, for being here on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me, Dr. Perry.